Okay. So I'm reviewing and reflecting on what I was talking about. And in the last video, which I'm going to post. But I listening to that, I came to a kind of a realization. So what it is there's basically only one of two explanations for the event and the whole story. And so I want to go into one of the two explanations, and probably both of them, because one will segue into the other. So one explanation, as bizarre as this may sound, I want to put it to you this way. Say you have a person who is like clinically retarded. They're clinically retarded, okay? And this person, so like if you think of a person that's clinically retarded, they're gonna if two parents had a child that was just clinically like retarded, well, the parents would pretty much have to take care of their retarded child all up through their adulthood and beyond. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, a clinically retarded person can't function in the real world. Okay, so if you were to picture like a clinically retarded person like that it didn't get detected that the person was clinically retarded, and so their whole life they were just kind of like, they had all these issues, but it was never clinically determined that all these issues are because this person is just clinically retarded, okay? And then that person turns 18, and the typical thing where it's like, okay, now go out into the real world and take care of yourself or whatever, and nobody knows that this person is clinically retarded, where again, in reality, if parents had a child that was clinically retarded, those parents would basically be bound to taking care of that retarded person up through their adulthood and beyond. They would just be forever young, just a retard that always needs their parents to take care of them. Okay, so one explanation. See, there's really only like two feasible explanations for this story that I'm storyboarding with this girl. Is that, and one of them being is that she is like literally clinically retarded, and then that would explain everything. So, like, if you could imagine someone being clinically retarded that is just on their own and doesn't have parents or really anybody to help them and stuff, and so they have to. This clinically retarded person has to figure out how to survive in the real world, in the world, the disaster that would ensue, the complete disaster that would ensue. And that's only one of two, maybe three plausible explanations for this story. Is that she's just literally like clinically retarded, and that would explain everything. That would be one feasible explanation for everything. And the other, though, would be that she's a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath, where she goes about her life. That's how she manipulates people, is by always just incapable. Like, I need help. I need help with this. I need help with that. I need help with everything. And that's how a person manipulates everyone around them to do their bidding, which is what a vulnerable narcissist does, you know. Vulnerable, think of it, the term vulnerable narcissist. Someone who's vulnerable, can't protect themselves, blah, blah, blah. And so they need other people to protect them because they're just vulnerable. And that's what a vulnerable narcissist, the whole persona of a vulnerable narcissist is to project themselves to everyone else as though they're vulnerable and need help. And which would, you know, and so there's only really two viable explanations. Is that she truly is this vulnerable person that just it needs someone to take care of them all the time, or that she's a vulnerable narcissist, that she's using this facade of vulnerability to exploit any and everyone around her as much as she possibly can. And one is very diabolical. The vulnerable narcissist, that's very extremely diabolical. That's evil. Whereas the other is a very tragic thing. It's like very like someone who is so vulnerable that they're like clinically retarded and therefore needs to be taken care of all of their life, needs to have requires every need to be met. Like here, that's, you know, like, and that's what I'm saying, dude. That is what this scenario is. That is exactly what this scenario is. There are only two explanations. Okay? Is that she's just a vulnerable person that requires her needs constantly being met by other people because she's that vulnerable and debilitated from her vulnerability that she needs someone to daily take care of her, like to basically babysit her throughout the rest of her life. It's either that or that she is a vulnerable narcissist. Now, if you were to look at someone who is genuinely so vulnerable that they just need to be taken care of by someone else, would you imagine that person getting involved with witches and witchcraft and stuff like this? And I wouldn't imagine that. If they're vulnerable, then they would be scared of those things. They wouldn't be active participants in them. They would understand that their vulnerability that's something that they would be repelled by. They wouldn't be diving headfirst into an Illuminati fucking membership and stuff. They wouldn't, you know. And you know, one of the creepiest things about a vulnerable narcissist is that they can present themselves as innocent. Like they can be like the person that is doing the act of murder and stuff, and then when it's investigated, they just keep up their role as I'm just some vulnerable retard that doesn't know anything and I'm easily manipulated, and then they would be the least. Everybody would look at them like, oh, this person is just a retard. There's no way that this retard would be the murderer, would be the one that caused the murder. If this retard is involved, it's just because other people manipulated this retard, and this retard is ruled out as a suspect because they're just an innocent retard that was manipulated by other people. You see, a vulnerable narcissist can walk through and manipulate everyone around them with their fake vulnerability, and fucking be the main culprit in something like murder and stuff, and be the easiest to get away with it, because if it ever did get investigated, they're just a retard. They're just a vulnerable retard that's easily manipulated, and so they're going to be immediately ruled out as this person obviously has nothing to do with it, when in reality that person was the one who is so fucking advanced in manipulating others through vulnerable narcissism that they're like the main one. They're the one that orchestrated they played all the players. An advanced vulnerable narcissist can play players, like can prey on predators. A vulnerable narcissist can easily prey on predators by playing the vulnerable person, the vulnerable retard that's just that's just like MK Ultra controlled. So it's not my fault, because I'm just controlled by all these people, and they get immediately ruled out as, well, this is just another innocent victim of these people, these predators. When in fact the vulnerable narcissist played off of all those predators to orchestrate what the outcome that the vulnerable narcissist wanted. And if they're a psychopath, then the goal that they achieved was murder or something extremely sadistic, And then when you look at vulnerable narcissists and you think of ideas like submissive, vulnerable narcissists are always submissive. They're always playing the victim. They love to be tied up, because the person that is tied up in bondage straps is the victim. So they love to be the submissive victim in the ritualistic role of a satanic cult. That's one of the main ritualistic roles in a satanic cult is you've got members that are submissive members, that they're the ones that willingly allow themselves to be tied up, willingly allow themselves to be gang fucked, willingly allow themselves to play the victim submissive role. And these type of cult members play like are like high priestesses and shit. Like that's their function in the cult, and they can gain high status within the cult as priestesses and shit, as the submissive victim role play, where they're the one that gets tied up and they're the one that gets tortured, but they're doing it willingly because they're a sadist. They get off on being abused and submitting to being tied up and gang fucked. That's what they enjoy. That's the role that they have chosen in that fucking in that Illuminati cult or Freemasonic cult or whatever you want to call it. And so vulnerable narcissists are great. Are very useful tools in the satanic cult or the Freemasonic cult. Like those people have powerful positions within ranks in those kind of things. The vulnerable narcissist, especially if they're a psychopath. A vulnerable narcissistic psychopath, like those are the people that during rituals, they're the submissive one in the ritual. They're the one that bows down before the horned altar and gets tied up by the other members and gang fucked and shit like this. The vulnerable. That's why when you look into narcissism, there's two basic types of narcissist. There's the grandiose, which is the more aggressive. The grandiose narcissist does not have traits of vulnerability. They display the opposite of vulnerability. They display themselves as having no vulnerabilities because they're that superior. That's the the grandiose narcissist. The vulnerable narcissist is the opposite, where they always play the victim. That's how they manipulate everyone around them, is they're constantly the victim. When in reality, they're sadistic. Like they're like I described, they're the submissive high priestess in the cult that is getting tied up and gang fucked willingly because they enjoy that. That's what they enjoy. And they want to perfect the art of manipulating people through victimhood. And, it's like you see the person or people that are, their car is on the side of the road and they're pretending like their car is broken down, so that and they're predators waiting for their victim, and then somebody drives up and to help them because they're portraying themselves as a victim, like their car's broken down and they're stranded, and so a person pulls over to help them, and then that's when the people fucking jack them, and steal their car and kill them. Dude, there are real life stories where that's how people die. People get murdered by pulling over to help someone who has their hazard lights on and is presenting themselves as though their car's broken down, and they end up getting murdered trying to help that person. The victim role is an extremely effective in the fucking practice in the dark arts. The dark art, in the dark arts, the person that can play the victim is like extremely beneficial in this whole witchcraft dynamic. So going back to what I'm saying is, there's really only two explanations for what happened in my story. One of them being that she really is this so vulnerable that she is the equivalent of a clinically retarded person who has just stumbled through life alone without any help and ended up mixed in all of this because she's just clinically retarded. The only other explanation is that she's a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath that is genuinely involved in a witch cult, and that's it. There are no, when you really step back and you look at this whole story, those are the only two explanations. One is that she really is just an innocent victim who's like clinically retarded, who has been exploited to the extreme by predators, namely like self-proclaimed witches that are predators. And it's either that or that she is a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath. And I suppose there could be a combination of those two things, that as a result of her retardation, that she just learned to use her vulnerability to manipulate people. But then someone who's retarded, how would they really be able to do that? They really wouldn't. It's almost like it's either one or the other. A retarded person wouldn't be able to learn to use their retardation to manipulate others around them. They might, but they wouldn't be really good at it. Like, people would be able to see, like, the retard is just using this. It'd be obvious. It'd be like watching a child try to manipulate an experienced adult. 9 times out of 10, an experienced adult can see when a child is trying to manipulate people through victimhood or anything else. Like when the kid starts crying, like, just to get attention, and as an adult, you look at that and you know what's going on. You're like, okay, this child is just trying to get attention, whatever. And so with someone who's clinically retarded, like trying to do that, it would be pretty easy to see where it's like, okay, this guy, this person, and it would be kind of, entertaining and almost kind of, cute in a sense, or it's like, okay, fucking the retards trying to use their retardation to get me to, do something or whatever, and you just be like, whatever, it's not a big deal. But if it's a vulnerable narcissist, like, these people are extremely advanced You're not gonna see it, especially if they're a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath. Like you're not gonna see it at all, man. You're gonna see them and be like, holy shit, I need to help this person. They're in a really bad situation. Oh my gosh, how terrible this is. And so, like I said, there's only really two explanations. Is that she's like literally clinically fucking retarded and literally needs a person or people to basically babysit her all throughout her life, all through her entire life. Or that she's a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath. There's a pretty fine line. Like there isn't really much wiggle room, in between sense, I would say, if I were to just guess. Although, the third thing could be a near perfect balance of clinical retardation and clinical vulnerable narcissistic psychopathy. There could be a very good balance going on there. Which I guess would be the only third explanation, So like that has to be taken in consideration when doing this story and like a naysayer would be like, oh no, there's probably all kinds of other explanations. But see, the naysayer isn't working on this puzzle and piecing it together and experienced it firsthand and has likely never even experienced anything in their life. When you just look at the event itself, in 2 weeks, fucking, I get a death threat, home burnt down, fucking, involving a murder and a murder investigation, like all this shit all happening in 2 weeks. This is not something that is a common occurrence with people, And so based off of what I've experienced and really working on this puzzle on and off for the last 2 years, I would say there's only really three options. One of them is she's a full-blown vulnerable narcissistic psychopath, or she's like full-blown retarded, which is less it's less likely that she's just full-blown retarded. And so there's only two, and possibly the only other possible one would be it's like a nearly perfect balance of clinical retardation and narcissistic psychopathy, like a nearly perfect balance of clinical retardation and psychopathy, which is I would guess that would be a pretty rare thing to in the whole fucking in this kind of like in the field of psychology. It would be pretty rare to come across someone who's with a near perfect balance of clinical retardation and clinical narcissistic psychopathy. Like that's probably the least likely of the three. And but then I wanted to talk to you about, like, imagine if it really is that she's like just clinically retarded. Nobody is going to help her. She is like, if she is clinically retarded, she is fucked, dude. Like nobody. Cause I spent 3 years with this, trying to support this person for 3 fucking years, and the end result was fire and fucking witches, and like it was almost like it did the opposite of help her, like, well, and that would be because it isn't help that she was ever seeking. It was the opposite of help that she was seeking. But yeah, 3 years of supporting this person to try to help them because they were desperately seeking, to escape all this abuse and desperately seeking a solution. And so I spent 3 years supporting this person, and the end result was fire and death and and witches and all this insanity. But yeah, if what it is that she's just clinically retarded, like she is totally fucked. Nobody would give her the time of day that I did. Like I am a rare in that sense. I'm a rare person. Like she's not going to come across people like me very often in her life. I guarantee it. And so because it's going to be rare for her to come across someone like me that would spend 3 years and then the end result being that she's worse than she was. Um, um, the chances of her finding someone that would go to the trouble I did is next to none. And so the future that that awaits her is going to be way worse than what she experienced with me. Like like she's going into into the what would be a good you know she's just willingly allowing herself to be surrounded by demons. Whereas I spent, 3 years protecting her from it because she came to me desperately trying to escape and desperately seeking help. Or was it all just part of her manipulation? It depends on if she was clinically retarded or if she's a clinically fucking narcissistic psychopath. And again, when you look at her ties to witches, witchcraft, Satanism, Illuminati, and all this stuff, it appears as though she's a much more likely to be a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath than just like a victim, like an innocent retarded victim of exploitation. So it looks like either way she's fucked. It looks like what she needs is exorcism, and I am not an exorcist. And it looks like she either needs an exorcism or that she's clinically retarded and just needs to be taken care of, like have someone just babysit her for the rest of her life. And the chances of her finding an exorcist are zero, pretty almost zero. And the chances of her finding someone that's going to babysit her and tend to her every need because she's clinically retarded are also next to none. And this was something that I had to come to terms with during all this processing, all this, because, I lived with her for 3 years. We were basically married. And so, of course, I cared about her and loved her. And to watch this person, and to have to process all this, like what's going to happen to her. I mean, if she's demon possessed or if she's like like part of some satanic cult, murder, death cult, well then she deserves whatever she gets coming to her. But if she really is like just an innocent victim of clinical retardation, like what's going to be the end result? And when you think about it, it's not going to be good. Like I was her only best hope. I was her one and only best hope. Like the chances of her finding someone like me in the future are next to none too, dude. It's like most people are not going to tolerate a clinically retarded person clinging to them for every need and everything. Like when I was with her, I just assumed that it was the amount of trauma she suffered, that I just needed to be patient and be supportive and stuff. And but then then it's death threats and fires and witches and all this shit. And it's like at some point, how tolerant can I be? It's like, fuck this, like get me the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? But like for her to find someone as tolerant as I was and as caring and willing to unplug her and shit, she's definitely not going to be finding that. And the end result is it's either there are basically two predictions. The end result is going to be what would happen to a clinically retarded person left to the world, or a completely like evil satanic fucking demon possessed person, left to their own devices, either a clinically retarded person alone in the world left to their own devices, or a full-fledged, a vulnerable narcissistic psychopath left to their devices, one of the two, and that's it. So natural law will handle all of this, I suppose. I don't know. It's a mystery. It's all a mystery.